Did you know that the exotic plants you've been buying might actually be harming your local ecosystem? Native plants could be the solution you never knew you needed. They're not just beautiful, they're practically maintenance-free and can save you thousands in gardening costs. Let me show you why. Welcome to Don't Do This Guide, where we show you the common gardening mistakes to avoid and what to do instead. If you're new here and want to transform your garden without the usual trial and error, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now you might have heard gardeners, myself included, banging on about native plants. But what exactly are they? Well, put simply, a native plant is one that has evolved and adapted to a specific region over hundreds, even thousands of years. Think of it like this. A plant native to the woodlands of, say, Surrey has spent centuries learning to thrive in that dappled shade, that particular soil, alongside its woodland companions. It's perfectly suited to that environment. Introduce a plant from the sun-drenched hills of Greece, and it's a different story altogether. It's out of its comfort zone, a bit like asking a polar bear to live in a rainforest. It might survive, but it'll require a lot more care and attention. And that's the beauty of native plants. They've done the hard work of adapting, so you don't have to. Plus, they come with a whole host of benefits for your garden and the environment. Let's be honest, none of us want to spend every waking hour tending to our gardens. We'd rather be enjoying them, wouldn't we? That's where native plants come into their own. Because they're perfectly adapted to their surroundings, they need far less fussing over. They're used to the climate, the rainfall, the soil conditions. They're tough cookies. Take watering, for instance. Native plants have evolved to cope with the natural rainfall patterns of their region. They've got deep root systems that tap into underground water sources, making them incredibly drought tolerant. That means less time standing with a hose pipe and more time putting your feet up with a nice cuppa. And less watering means saving water, which is a win for both your water bill and the environment. And it's not just watering. Native plants are generally less susceptible to pests and diseases that plague non-native species. They've built up natural defenses over time, making them less reliant on chemical interventions. So if you're looking for a low-maintenance, water-wise garden, native plants are your secret weapon. They'll thrive with minimal intervention, leaving you free to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Now, more than ever, we need to be thinking about how our gardens can support wildlife. And native plants are absolutely crucial in this regard. You see, over millennia, native plants and local wildlife have evolved together. They've formed a mutually beneficial relationship, a bit like a well-rehearsed dance. Take our beloved bees, for instance. They rely on native plants for nectar and pollen, which provide them with the energy they need to buzz about and pollinate our crops and wildflowers. But it's not just bees. Butterflies, moths, hoverflies, beetles, they all depend on native plants for food and shelter. And these insects, in turn, provide food for birds, bats, hedgehogs, and other creatures further up the food chain. By planting natives, you're not just creating a beautiful garden, you're creating a vital habitat, a haven for wildlife. You're playing your part in supporting biodiversity and ensuring the health of our ecosystems. And it's not just about providing food. Native plants offer shelter for nesting birds, hibernation spots for insects, and hiding places for all sorts of creatures. They create a vibrant, thriving ecosystem right in your backyard. Now let's talk about something we gardeners hold dear: soil. It's the foundation of a healthy garden, and native plants play a vital role in keeping it in tip-top condition. You see, native plants have deep, extensive root systems that delve deep into the ground. These roots act like tiny engineers, improving soil structure and preventing erosion. Think of it like this. The roots bind the soil together, creating channels for water to penetrate and air to circulate. This improves drainage, aeration, and overall soil health. And healthy soil means healthy plants. It provides the nutrients, water, and oxygen that plants need to thrive. It's a virtuous cycle. What's more, native plants often have symbiotic relationships with soil microorganisms. These tiny creatures, invisible to the naked eye, are essential for breaking down organic matter and releasing nutrients back into the soil. So by planting natives, you're not just feeding your plants, you're feeding the soil food web, creating a thriving ecosystem beneath your feet. Now let's talk about pests and diseases. Every gardener's nightmare, right? But here's the thing, native plants have a few tricks up their sleeves. Because they've evolved alongside local pests and diseases, they've developed natural defenses over time. They're less susceptible to the problems that plague non-native species. Think of it like this. A native plant has been engaged in a botanical arms race with local pests for centuries. It's developed thorns, hairs, or bitter-tasting compounds to deter unwanted visitors. And because they're less prone to problems, native plants generally require fewer chemical interventions. That means less spraying, less pollution, and a healthier garden for you and the environment. Of course, no plant is completely immune to pests and diseases, but by choosing natives, you're stacking the odds in your favor. You're creating a more resilient garden that's better equipped to deal with whatever nature throws its way. While native plants might require a slightly higher initial investment, they offer significant cost savings in the long run. Remember how we talked about native plants being low maintenance and water-wise? Well, that translates into real savings on your water bill and gardening expenses. Because they're adapted to local conditions, native plants need less watering, fertilizing, and pest control. They're naturally thrifty. And because they're generally longer lived than non-natives, you won't have to replace them as often. That means fewer trips to the garden center and more money in your pocket. So while the initial cost of native plants might seem slightly higher, consider it an investment. An investment in a healthier, more sustainable, and ultimately more affordable garden. Now let's talk about something close to my heart-preserving biodiversity. Our planet is facing a biodiversity crisis, with countless plant and animal species at risk of extinction. But here's the good news. Our gardens can play a vital role in reversing this trend. By choosing native plants, we can create havens for wildlife, support pollinators, and help preserve the intricate web of life that sustains us all. Every native plant we choose, every patch of wildflowers we sow, makes a difference. It's about creating corridors for wildlife to move through, connecting fragmented habitats, and ensuring the survival of species for generations to come. It's about recognizing that our gardens are not just our own. They're part of a larger ecosystem. And by embracing native plants, we can create gardens that are both beautiful and ecologically sound. Now, you might be wondering, how do I actually go about incorporating native plants into my own garden? Well, it's easier than you might think. First things first, do a little research. Find out which plants are native to your region. Your local library, garden center, or wildlife trust can be great resources. Once you have a list of potential candidates, consider your garden's conditions. Is it sunny or shady? Wet or dry? What type of soil do you have? Choose plants that are well suited to your garden's specific conditions. This will give them the best chance of thriving. When planting, try to mimic the natural plant communities found in your area. Group plants together that would naturally grow side by side. This will create a more harmonious and ecologically sound garden. And don't be afraid to experiment. Start small, perhaps with a few native wildflowers in a border or a native shrub in a pot. See what works well in your garden and go from there. Remember, gardening is a journey, not a destination. Enjoy the process, learn as you go, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. There you have it. Native plants aren't just an environmental choice, they're the smart gardener's secret weapon. They're adapted to our climate, our soils, and our wildlife. By embracing native plants, you'll create a garden that's not only beautiful but also requires less work, conserves water, and supports a thriving ecosystem. If you found value in today's guide, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment about which native plants you're planning to try. I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, remember, work with nature, not against it. Happy gardening.